Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats.
You know, there's something kind of special when you manage to dust off a little gem that, honestly, you didn't even know existed. And if you're within the sound of my voice, that must mean you're in the seats with once more. As always, my name is Dave Voigt. I'm the host of this podcast where we sit down with a wide-ranging variety of industry professionals and pick their brain about current projects, state of the industry, how they got started, and so very much more in a light and conversational fashion. Because that's how we like to do it. And if you like how we do it, we'd love it if you'd subscribe to our podcasts. You're listening, so I think we're halfway there already. But you can find our podcast basically wherever you find your podcasts. Either Apple, Spotify, Google, Amazon, it's all good. And plus, you can find every single one of our episodes archived over at our YouTube channel. Also, we'd really appreciate it if you'd follow us on social media. You can do that on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at either In The Seats or at It's Podcast One for all sorts of updates. And finally, and dare I say most importantly, please give us a visit over at In The Seats, intheseats.ca for all the latest and greatest movie news, reviews, and, anything else we can think of, because we love talking about the moving image, be it movies, be it TV, be it what have you, because that's just how we roll, and we definitely love it when you come pay us a visit, because we want to recommend some of the weird stuff that we see, and also maybe some of the bigger stuff that you should or shouldn't see, but that's just, that's the life of a critic, and that's just, it's the life we've chosen. But on this episode, we got a good one. Boy, we got a good one, and we've got a movie that, quite honestly, I didn't know existed. It's 321 Frankie Go Boom, which you may find just as called Frankie Go Boom, and it's available on Prime in the States as well as Tubi and a variety of other indie platforms, and you can buy it or rent it on iTunes, Google Play, YouTube, all that kind of fun stuff. But it's a pretty wild comedy from writer-director Jordan Roberts with an all-star cast featuring Charlie Hunnam, Lizzie Kaplan, Chris O'Dowd, Whitney Cummings, Chris Noth, Nora Dunn, Ron Perlman. It's wild. It's basically it's about family dysfunction. It's about romance. It's about a lot of things, but there's some real heart in the dysfunction, which I honestly think is what makes it that much funnier. And we got the unique pleasure to sit down with writer-director Jordan Roberts, who is an industry veteran, as it were. And I picked his brain not only about this movie, but just about working in the studio system and working in general, and sort of the state of the industry as it all evolves. And it made for a pretty fascinating talk, which I certainly enjoyed the hell out of, and I hope you do too. But I mean, first off, obviously, just thank you for the time. I do appreciate it. You're a busy man, but I mean, I appreciate you sitting down to talk with us.
My pleasure, buddy. Happy to be here, really, sincerely.
Now, I mean, I guess first question, talk to me a little bit just about sort of the birth of, sort of the origins for Frankie Go Boom, because I mean, I literally just finished watching the movie, and I mean, it's funny, but it's fucking honest too. Like there's
I love you. You're my favorite.
There's honesty in the dysfunction.
Yes, beautiful. That is why I made it. I love that. I love that you said that. Okay, well, so honesty being the first topic of discussion. My first movie is a movie called Around the Bend, and the first that I directed, and it was received very poorly by the film critics of America, if not the world. I love the movie. It's done very well over time. People are, it's got a lot of fans, and it's not a terrible movie, but it was terribly received. And it crushed me, man. I wasn't prepared for it. I've talked to many filmmakers since that had a similar experience when their first film was eviscerated. I didn't know that I needed critics to love me, and I didn't know that I would fall apart when they didn't, but I did. Not quite complete unhingement, but close. I was really miserable, and so I started this new project to get myself out of. My writing career wasn't impacted by the negative reviews of the film, but my directing career was. And so I made a bunch of dough as a writer, and I kept sticking money in a cookie jar saying, I'm going to make my own movie. I'm going to make my own movie. And eventually I started writing this thing, which was a comedy, and I didn't know what it was about. And right before we started shooting, my wife finally said, for those who don't know, the movie is about a humiliating sex video on the internet, right? And my wife finally asked me right before we, jumped into the production, like, Jordan, what is this movie about? Like, what is this about? You've, so far as I know, never been in a humiliating sex video and da da da. And I couldn't really answer. And I thought about it for the day and I went, oh my God, my movie is about Rotten Tomatoes. My movie is absolutely, I mean, on the I hope I can say this, but on the in the film, the website's called Pick a Lamp and Go Fuck Yourself, because it's a home it's a home design
Yeah,
slash
yeah.
sex tape combination business. Um, but it's Rotten Tomatoes. And so the movie was very much about me coming to terms with what it was like to feel, whether you, what is humiliation? You know, I felt humiliated. Frankie feels humiliated. And the movie is about recognizing that humiliation is this is going to seem grandiose, but it's a choice. People are going to think weird shit about you, no matter who you are. I spent too much of my life concerned about what you think about me. And so the movie is very much about, in the film, he's concerned because his heart was shattered.
Yeah.
He's more learning how to come back from the humiliation of love. I was using his story to come back from the humiliation of filmmaking, and got to combine the stories by having a filmmaker in the movie who's insane. So I got to, you know, deal with all my shit in one 90-minute serving.
That's got to be cathartic, not just for you, but I mean, especially everyone that you're sort of getting on board, especially in the casting process, if they're really truly sort of understanding sort of the material and what the story you're trying to tell.
Yeah, I mean, it was certainly cathartic for me, and you know, my favorite moment in the film, or one of them, is you know, the two favorite moments are like the humiliation moment where he cannot achieve erectile function with the stunning and very, you know, incredibly alluring Lizzie Kaplan, and that moment is just endless and hysterical and beautiful to me and human. But then when, you know, Ron Perlman playing politically incorrectly 10 years ago,
Yeah.
you know, a transgender woman. I would not and could not do that today and should not do that today. But this, you know, she's played with integrity, 90% of her. And when she pulls him into her bosom and says, let your humiliation set you free, she's uttering the theme of the movie. And I believe those words, and I believe them coming out of Ron's mouth.
How did you get sort of the ensemble that you had? Because I mean, obviously Ron has been well established, but I mean, people like
Yeah.
Charlie, Lizzie was a bit on the come up at the time. Like, how did you get sort of this unique mix of people, especially Chris O'Dowd as well?
Yeah, I mean, I was given great advice early on by a filmmaker that since I paid for this film, I don't know if I already said that, there was no money. So it was a very inexpensive film and people weren't going to get paid. And he said, listen, and I didn't want to make it without great actors. And he said, well, if you want great actors, here's some advice. These are the three things you need. A great script. It's got to be a great script. Parts that they don't get to play anywhere else. If you want them to work for free, give them something to do that they don't get to do for money. And I was like, that was cool advice. And then let them sleep in their own beds. Don't ask them to come to Arizona or Latvia, you know, to work for $200 a day. Let them sleep in their beds. Give them something wonderful to do in a project that they can get behind. And that's how it happened. I mean, everybody got, you know, Chris O'Dowd at that point was only playing nice guys. He got to play a dick. And Charlie had never, I think to this day, I don't think Charlie's ever played anybody like Frankie.
Yeah.
And he may not like this and people may disagree with me, but he is Frankie. He's an incredibly affable, decent, kind, generous, funny, self-effacing, humble guy who's constantly packing on the six pack and the big guns and, you know, smirking and being a dick. But he's a really charming man. And, you know, God bless him, he lost like 20 pounds. He lost his pecs and he just played a regular dude. And anyway, that's why he did it. You know, everybody got to do something a little. Chris Noth got to play a, you know, scumbag drug addict actor instead of the button down Wall Street dude he's been playing for 20 years. So that's how it happened.
That feels like good advice for filmmakers anywhere, just to try to give people stuff they've never done before. I mean, I've never heard it worded quite so perfectly.
No, my friend was tremendously prescient and helpful to me to give me that advice when we were making the film. And I try and share it anywhere I can. So I'm happy I got to share it with you and whoever's going to hear this. It's good advice. Do it. In all three of them. It's not just one or two. It's all three. You're not going to get. I could never have gotten my cast to come with me to Tucson. No way. Not for the money. No way. Even if I put them up in a, you know, nice shitty hotel, you know, no way. But they got to sleep in their beds. They got to do something they don't get to do, and they got to do something with quality with other people. You know, they all got to they all loved working together. So I was the lucky recipient of great generosity all around.
So is that how Big Hero 6 came around? You needed to recoup the money you just spent on the movie?
I can't remember the timing of it. I think so. Probably. I was there forever, man. I was Disney for 2 years. Yeah, I think that sounds about right. And yeah. And then I was in movie jail, writing jail for a while because I'd spent 2 years in the ghetto that is Disney. In the writing, if you're in Disney, you're in Disney. You're not doing anything else. So I was 2 years there, and I'd spent a year making Frankie before that. So when I finished working on Big Hero, I came out and like nobody remembered who I was, and I didn't have a freaking career, and it was like kind of desperate for 6 or 7 months. And then Big Hero won an Oscar, and that all changed.
Well, I mean, that's the thing that fascinates me because, I mean, when people go into the Disney World, they tend to stay there, but jumping in and then jumping out feels like,
yeah, it's not normal.
It's like a risk that people don't necessarily appreciate.
No, I don't think you're supposed to jump out. It was an amazing process, and I'm very proud of the film, and I'm very proud of the characters that I created, and that I'm very proud of it. And it's a process of working that was very difficult for me. The 2 years were spent doing what they do, which is iteration after iteration after iteration after iteration, throw it away, start again. And that's John Lasseter, who was running the program at the time, has this massive capacity for invention, and clearly he knows what he's doing. He's responsible for some of the greatest stories told in the last 30 years. And it is partially because of this capacity to constantly be willing to start again. But from my perspective, it was like, I just didn't want to start again, So once was plenty for me.
I can imagine there's pros and cons on both ends, because I mean, on one end, you've got the freedom to be more creative and do what you want, but on the other side, you're working in this sort of massive army of creativity that makes these amazing things. I can imagine they're very polar opposite experiences.
Yes, they are. And they're still figuring it out. And what's interesting is Pixar, John came down when Disney bought Pixar. John came down and ran both divisions, John Lasseter. And, those two institutions as institutions couldn't be more different. One was a free thinking Bay Area research and development company called Pixar, which was operated by a whole different culture or cultural standards than Disney, which is one of the old tried and true dinosaurs of Hollywood. So it was a fascinating time to be there while John was trying to bring some of that Bay Area culture to this behemoth, which was very fixed in his ways. And to his credit, whatever his shortcomings, he did that. The Disney movies that came out, Zootopia, Frozen, for goodness sakes, Moana, I mean, they're, tremendously good movies. Wreck-It Ralph, Big Hero.
Now, talk to me a little bit about Burn Your Maps, because obviously you worked with, I guess maybe I'm in Toronto, so we rep Jacob Tremblay pretty hard.
Oh, sure.
We got to support that kid wherever we can because he's
absolutely. I made that movie. I cut it in Toronto. I lived there the post was all in Toronto. So, and I shot it in Calgary and Mongolia, but mostly in Calgary. Loved that movie. It was a kind of sad story in some ways. I mean, it opened at TIFF. I think now it was maybe 6-7 years ago. And then there was the financiers had all sorts of difficulties in-house, lawsuits, craziness, and it sat on a shelf for 5 years, despite its opening at TIFF very successfully, great reviews.
I was there, yeah.
Yeah, it was, it was heartbreaking, to be honest. But it sat on a shelf for 5 years, and then it was just dumped. It was just dumped last June. They just literally just dumped it. They was literally contractually obligated to release it in 20 cities. So what they did was they released it in New York. It played at Cody Island at 8 a.m. for 7 days. And it played in downtown LA at 11 p.m. for 7 days. Same in Chicago, same in Boston. They literally sold no tickets, not one ticket, but they met their contractual obligation to release in 20 markets before streaming. It was a nightmare, and shame on the scumbags responsible for that decision, whoever you are. But love the movie. It's doing very well. I mean, nobody knows about it, but it's quite popular and people love it and share it. And there's a little bit of it's about a very, very quickly in the film, you realize it's about a family that lost a child, but it's actually a very honest, feel-good movie about that. It's not. It never pretends it's not agony, nor does it allow you to stay in agony. It's a movie about recovery from the impossible. So I love the film.
Now, I mean, that kind of dovetails into my next question, because on some ends, I love this business, but on other days, I just want to say, fuck this business. And I'm kind of curious, from your perspective, how do you sort of keep the creative energy up, especially when there are days when your movie can disappear for 5 years and you don't know what the fuck's going on? Like, how do you sort of sustain the energy to sort of keep outputting stuff?
Some days I don't, right? That's just
That's
some days I
life,
don't,
yeah.
and here's what I'd say. I'm 63. I'm 63. That's how old I am. So see, some people don't talk about how old they are. I'm 63. What I say to young folks, if possible, is make sure your focus is on your creativity and what you're doing. If you make your focus on the reception of that, and this goes back to the original idea of caring what the critics said about my first movie, but if our focus as artists, as creatives, is on the reception of what we create, you're in trouble. And the dismay and the despair you just described is going to increase. You can't avoid it, but I find when I focus on doing the very best work I can do, me personally, what is Jordan responsible for? The freest, the most honest, the most adventurous, the boldest, the most disciplined, and yet the most playful. Those are my concerns. If I do that, how you think about it, David, is finally none of my fucking business. And if I stay there, then this is a pretty okay life. But when I don't stay there, and none of us can stay there all the time, it's excruciating.
Is that how you process it? Just by sort of letting it in and then working through it and just sort of pushing it out the other end?
This is all brand new shit. I constantly process it different ways. But right now, I'm involved in this process called the Artist Way, which I remember this book. It came out like in the 90s, I think. And every person I knew was doing the Artist Way. And it's just basically a book about exploring not just creativity, but the ways in which we hinder our own. A woman named Julia Cameron wrote it. And I'm really amazed by the insights that I'm learning from this book. But one of the things she said, which was news to me, is that when you get criticism, read it and just read it. You don't have to take it in and feel it and feel the hurt of it, and then go, okay, here's where they're wrong. Here's where they're not wrong. What can I use from that criticism? Some of it is like not useful because people were writing it to be snarky and they succeeded at that. But sometimes you'll hear something like, you know what? That's right. That's true about that. I can do better next time, so right now my current thing is like, yeah, I'm going to take it in a little bit, feel it. And I also noticed that like when Burn was released, I did this thing that I don't think I'd ever done. I said to my wife and son, yo, dad, husband, a fucking mess for a few days. I'm going to feel my disappointment, my pain, my hurt, and my rage. And you know what? In 3 days, it was over. And I don't usually do that. So that gave me a new life tip. Well, I try to feel shit.
Well, no, that's not a bad way to be. I mean, even on my end, like I can't, like, I hate writing the bitchy reviews because they don't serve any purpose. The ones that are being snarky and bitchy for the sake of being snarky and bitchy don't actually serve any purpose in the relationship between the critic and the filmmaker. They really don't.
No. It's important to have that relationship. Obviously, film criticism is, right now we're in a very odd place, David. I don't have to tell you, because anyone could be a film critic anywhere. And some of them are qualified and some of them are absolutely not qualified. And yet their medium, the internet, is equal to anybody. So, but given what my new life lesson is, or my new life, it's not a lesson, I haven't learned it yet. My new life goal is to not give a shit what you think. I have ample opportunity because there's a lot of you. There's a lot of you. And so I'm given constant opportunities to not care what you think.
Well, and that's and that's the right way to be, as the person who's giving my opinion. That is absolutely the right way to be.
I think so. It's it beats the alternative.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, and this is I guess this dovetails into something else I want to ask, and this is a silly question, but I always like to ask it. If you can think back to the younger years, is there a movie or maybe like a piece of work that sort of you think was the formative moment for you to sort of become a writer and then eventually become a filmmaker?
Kind of, yeah. I mean, it's funny because I wrote two movies that I'm told by many, many, many parents taught children to cry in the movies, right?
Mm,
Two. One was March of the Penguins,
mm.
which lots of children cried in the movie theater for the first time with their parents. And that's a thing. And they got to, and the second was Big Hero 6, where I got a whole other generation of parents telling me that, oh my God, my son, he cried, my daughter, But Bambi,
Wow.
and crying in the cinema was absolutely so it's funny to me that years later, you know what I mean, I would find myself torturing a whole new generation of children. Not quite. I mean, obviously, tears in the cinemas is the beginning of a process of empathy and empathic understanding of others and how we process our own feelings, etc. But I mean, Bambi crushed me. So for good, bad, or indifferent, that was certainly one. And then I seen the play Equus for some reason, which is and Man of La Mancha, those two theater pieces, musical and straight play, Equus by Peter Sheffer and Man of La Mancha, were very powerful to me. I've stolen from both of them endlessly in terms of how they tell stories and what their themes are. Those
I,
I would say those three.
I love that your creative process is all centered around making people cry because I think in
Well, I
Frankie was
guess.
crying tears of joy.
Yeah, no, Frankie was. I don't think I'll ever make a movie but at the end of the day, what was curious about Frankie is, um, it is a love story. Ultimately, it's a love. Oh, I'll tell a very funny anecdote that you'll appreciate because when we made the movie, I would do these test screenings, not official test screenings, but I'd invite everyone I could sit down and then ask questions and I'd answer and they'd tell me what they thought and they'd write shit down. And 60% of the audience had the same criticism over and over. It's like, how did this funny movie become a rom-com all of a sudden? I was funny and then it's a rom-com and blah, blah. And in the original version that we shot, Charlie is on the phone with his mom and dad when he's locked up in his trailer and he's fled at the beginning of the third act and he's out there. And he's talking to mom and dad and it's the same scene we've seen before. They're not listening. They're being kind of stupid. They're taking Bruce's side, but they're the ones who carry the information that Lizzie's going to China, right? His love interest is going to China. And as I watched the cuts, I couldn't figure out how to address this note that everyone didn't like, that it was the rom-com. And I suddenly went, if Phyllis, Ron Perlman's character, tells him to go get the girl, they're not going to have that problem anymore. And I have no idea how I thought that, but I did. And so I called Ron and I said, Ron, would you mind if we came and put you back in your makeup and your dress? And I filmed the other end of Charlie's phone call. I couldn't reshoot the scene because Charlie was now 30 pounds heavier from Sons of Anarchy. And so I had to take Charlie's end of the phone call, but I shot a new end of the phone call for Phyllis. And instead of the parents, it's now Phyllis, Ron Perlman, basically saying she's going to China and what's the matter with you? You love her, go get her. And we never heard the note again, not from a single person. And I was a filmmaker that was like, I'm not sure what the lesson is, except that if you're gonna, audiences don't have so much a problem going from A to F, but you got to give them a C, D, E to do it, because nobody minded that it became a romantic comedy in its end, as long as I told them how we were doing that. Does that make sense?
No, and it does, and because it wasn't the parents, it allowed us as the audience to sort of make it feel more owned and feel more honest, as opposed to sort of leaning into sort of the stereotypical tropes of the rom-com that people would expect. Like if the
Yeah,
parents had come up and be
yeah,
like, all right, he's selling it, it's turning into a rom-com. Okay,
right.
no, it's being cute, it's being honest. They still
Yeah,
have this connection even after all
yeah,
the funny trauma of those two
yeah,
interacting with each other,
yeah, yeah. No, I'll never forget it as long as and the other thing that was curious is that, not to spoil anything, but at the end of the movie, it ended on a very earnest note, which was a reunion of sorts between lovers, etc. And it was quite earnest. And there was some, criticism of that earnestness. And I was like, for a long time, I was like, I'm going to live with that. It's okay. And then I thought, no, you know what? Let's give Bruce the final word. And that's why I took that final scene, reversed it, and put Bruce's voiceover on it. And I don't think I'll ever make an editorial decision that is as satisfying as that one and is cheap. I mean, I recut the movie, and all I did was I played a scene backwards and put voiceover over it, and it changed the end of the film completely.
Oh, and
You
Ben,
know,
that was the cherry on top for the movie, though. It
and
really was.
it was really. But again, that's why I'm a fan of criticism. I like that I tested the movie with people, and they said, "Hey, it's that dumb. It's a rom-com." How did it come? I like that they gave me that, because that gave me the impetus to put Ron Perlman on the phone. I like that people said, I didn't like the kissy kissy at the end, because it gave me the impetus to put the cherry on the cake, as you're saying, you know?
Yeah. Well, you know what?
So
I think that's it for me. And I mean, I think Frankie's going to sort of unearth a new life. And I mean, especially these days, we're all home watching stuff. This is definitely one of those little gems that people need to unearth and watch. And I think the people
beautiful.
are going to get a kick out of it once again. And thank you for the time today, man. This was an absolute
Your
pleasure.
mouth to God's ears, David. Thank you so much, buddy.
All
A
right.
great
Cheers.
pleasure. Look forward to doing it again.
And don't forget to visit our friends over at Bay Street Video for all your DVD, Blu-ray rental, or purchasing needs this summer, as they are still open for curbside and some mailing delivery as well. Over at 1172 Bay Street, Toronto, Ontario, Canada, you can give them a call at 416-964-9088. That's 416-964-9088. Or send them an email at baystreetvideoto@gmail.com for any of your DVD and Blu-ray needs.